Hey friends, welcome to this week's episode. Today we have the insightful Natalie on the podcast, a passionate advocate addressing the unspoken challenges women face post-childbirth. She empowers mothers in their 40s and beyond to reclaim their bodies and vitality with practical knowledge and confidence. Natalie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I really can't wait to dive into our topic.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
So, what advice do you have for women, in their 40s, feeling overwhelmed by their physical changes, and how to regain that confidence back?
Yeah. Yeah, it's around that 40-year mark. What I found with my clients is that they're kind of having this moment, this pause. Most of them have kids who are older and a lot more independent now and able to care for themselves. So the moms aren't necessarily having to meet every single, demand or need as
Mhm.
much as if they were toddlers. And so they have a moment and they're with enough time to finally go, oh my gosh, what has happened? I feel like a wreck. They're finally noticing when they get a moment of pause that they're feeling exhausted or they're achy or their brains aren't quite functioning, which they may have noticed before, but couldn't necessarily address or take the time to address. And so now is that WTF moment. And they're trying to figure out what to do. So a lot of them are searching Google, like, why do I not feel like myself? Why am I lethargic? Why do I have this brain fog? And I would say that the moment came for me, years ago, and I found that movement, just starting with simple movement,
Mm.
was the best way to start. Whether it's taking a walk each day, whether that's 10 to 15, 30 minutes, or, finding a great yoga class or Pilates class. I mean, of course, I'm biased. I've been a Pilates instructor for 20 years, so that's my go-to. I think it's the greatest and best for anybody and everybody. So, it really does start with movement because then that kind of creates a little bit more of an energy shift. You're finally feeling, a little bit of strength, awareness in your body, mind clarity, and then things just start to click after that. And that's what my suggestion and my go-to would be. Just start with a little bit of movement and it'll change over time. Maybe
Yeah.
you start with a walk and you're like, okay, this is cool. I might start jogging a little bit. And this is super cool. I love the feeling of jogging. Oh, you know what? I'm going to sign up for that 5K that I saw before. And it just kind of progresses from there.
Yeah. No, I mean, people underestimate how important just walking is, and it really is a great step and has a lot of beneficial value, especially if you do walks without technology and you just really
Yep.
soak in the environment and be with yourself. And sometimes we forget to even just take the moment to listen to what's really going on inside, kind of like what you mentioned, because we're so
Yep.
busy and overwhelmed with the distractions. Parents, you need The Addicted Child, A Parent's Guide to Adolescent Substance Abuse by Richard Capriola. It's a must have for understanding teen substance use and learning the warning signs every parent should know. The Addicted Child, A Parent's Guide to Adolescent Substance Abuse by Richard Capriola. And here's the kicker. Richard spills the beans on explaining substance used by today's adolescents and how drugs work in the teen brain. He's even included important warning signs for self-harm and eating disorders and how to find the right help for your teen. And the best part is, you're getting all of these mind-blowing insights without breaking the bank. If you're a parent or know someone who is, this book is going to be your secret weapon. Kindle or paperback, grab your copy on Amazon or go to helptheaddictedchild.com. Insights in this book are pure gold. And spread the word, share the love, and let's empower ourselves with knowledge. Now, and I know also other things happen with our bodies. How can women in their 40s, tackle issues like the incontinence and the pelvic organ prolapse, after childbirth?
Yep.
How can we work on those types of things?
Yeah. Incontinence, pelvic organ prolapse, C-section rehabilitation, diastasis recti, which is the abdominal gap, the gap in your
Yeah.
abdominals, and that happens during pregnancy. And
I had that my first pregnancy, really bad,
yeah,
really bad. And
yeah.
I had two C-sections. And so it's like, I got to regain that stomach's muscle back?
Yeah, just like you were saying, as far as walking being underrated or underestimated, it's the same for your abdominals. And we don't really understand how much power and how much strength our abdominals hold and how much they're needed. And when we go through a pregnancy or two or three or four, each time it just takes a toll on our body, not just our abdominals, but the whole overall body, our pelvis and all. We're stretching muscles each time. And so abdominal strength is huge and important for supporting the pelvis, for supporting the spine, for supporting our posture. So if we want to eliminate, those everyday aches and pains like we get in our hips, or that sciatica pain that we get, or our neck pain, which is due to posture, it all comes down to your abdominal strength. Pelvic floor specifically, you're going to need those pelvic floor muscles rehabilitated. And that's one thing that we don't necessarily get information about when we're
Yeah.
pregnant or when we have kids. For instance, I know that in France, you are prescribed what they call a couch coach, and they send you home with a pelvic floor specialist. So that's internal pelvic floor work to let you know, is your pelvic floor functioning properly? If not, here are the exercises and things that you need to do. But since we're not getting that here, there are internal physical therapists that you can see to measure your pelvic floor strength. Physical therapy should be prescribed and required after every pregnancy, but especially after a C-section, because that is a major, major surgery. And I had to as well.
Yeah.
Um, and so there are simple exercises. Again, I'm going to talk about Pilates because I think Pilates, and that's what I've used to help my clients rehabilitate. Pilates was how I was able to help many women eliminate, if not, completely decrease or really decrease their incontinence issues, their pelvic organ prolapse, close up their abdominal gap from their
Yeah.
diastasis
That's what
recti. And they're,
I had to like I had someone insurance didn't cover it, so I just paid it,
yeah,
out of pocket just for a few sessions because she was able to measure how it's like you lay down on your back and like you stick like the four fingers in your pelvis and you sit up and you can see how like deep and far it goes, and that's how you can measure. Uh,
yes,
and the gap in your abdominals.
your abdominals.
But
Yeah.
yeah, what she did was like I had to do kind of like yoga exercises stuff, and she did like some massaging and she helped close it up. I mean, it really did make a difference in like the way my stomach even looked.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I've had clients come to me and they're not necessarily concerned about, or initially they might not know the necessity of it or the need for
Yeah.
it. And they're more concerned about looking, 3 months pregnant still, a year or two later, which I can completely understand. But there's so much more to it because
Yeah, exactly.
if you hadn't strengthened or closed up that gap, you might, if not feel it now, you're going to feel it many years later. And a lot of misconception is that you have to have surgery in order to support fix that, and you don't. And that's one of
Yeah.
the things I like to tell my clients too, is we can definitely decrease it significantly, if not eliminate it entirely. But yes, it's that abdominal separation between the fascia layers, and it's right up and down, either above the belly button or below the belly button. And you can measure it like you did with your fingers.
Hmm.
And sometimes if you do rounded motion, you might see something kind of push outward, which is a little unnerving, but you can definitely close that up so that you have that full fun of your abdominals and the support for your spine and pelvis that's needed.
Yeah. We talked a lot about like the physical aspects of like the body. How can, mothers address like the hormone imbalances post childbirth?
Yeah. Well, we as women go through so many hormone shifts. Puberty and then pregnancy and post-pregnancy, and then again in our late 30s, mid 40s, and then in 50s. And we don't necessarily, there's a lot more conversation around hormones lately. At least that's what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
And we're not leaving it until we turn 50, 55 to talk about hormones anymore, which everyone kind of, is a daunting, that time frame is daunting over us, going, oh God, menopause. But we need to look at the shifts that happen prior to that, not only for overall health, because hormone shifts will decrease muscle strength in the pelvis. So that's when women start to more so maybe experience their pelvic floor weakness issues, incontinence, etc. But if we can address it earlier, then we don't necessarily need to experience it come those later years. So, hormones have been an interesting subject. It's something that you can certainly test for what I found and what I've heard from many is that if you go to your general GP and you're asking for a hormone test, they may say something along the lines of, oh, it's so hard to test your hormones because they shift so much throughout the day, which is true, but there are certain tests that you can ask for that will show you what you need to know. And what I've learned and what I've read is that if you have a general physician who's open to that, great. If not, then you can certainly find someone such as a functional medicine doctor who's completely open and, ready to order those tests for you and to support you on looking at it in different ways.
Which test should people be, kind of asking for?
There's a couple the one I know for sure is a Dutch hormone test. And that there's urine tests and there's blood tests.
Yeah.
So a couple of people that I follow on Instagram that would have more information about this than I do would be Dr. Jolene Brighton and Dr. Marie Claire, I believe is her name. So I follow them. I get a lot of my information about hormones from them. I mean, I've had not several. I have two separate hormone tests. I've done a saliva test. I've done a urine test. I'll take that back. 3. I've also had a blood test. So as I'm 47, I wanted to find out where I was in my menopausal, process. And it turns out I'm perimenopausal, which is, I guess on spot for 47. And then at some point, maybe my cycles will end. But for me, because my mother passed from dementia about 3 years ago, and because I'm learning how hormones play a role in our cognitive health, it was important for me to really dive deep into what my body needed as far as micronutrients, hormone balancing, how food played a role in that. And I found all of those tests really helpful through my functional medicine doctor. So, and acupuncture is another key component to balancing hormones.
Yeah, it's important. We gotta keep track, not wait till the last minute. We gotta be proactive in our health. Well,
Yeah.
Natalie, it is time for the PowerMom Chronicles, and I cannot wait to find out what your answers are. And my first one to you is, what's a game-changing lesson life has taught you?
That movement is important. It's not, it's underrated for sure, and it's something we've heard about forever. That movement is life-changing. I've had 3 significant life-changing shifts in my life that all started with a movement practice, different movement practices. One was a Pilates practice as a solo mom with 3 daughters, committing to a 3-time-a-week Pilates practice was a game changer. It completely changed my energy, my body, my brain, how I parented, and how I started, and that started my businesses. So it was something I was teaching and preaching nonstop because I was a Pilates instructor. It was not something I was practicing. So that was a huge life lesson. And then again, it was yoga practice that changed my my life too. So those 2, I would say, were huge.
And
huge life lesson.
Yeah, and reflecting on your journal, what practical lessons or insights can our listeners apply to improve their own lives? I know you were talking a lot about exercise, but I wonder if there's, anything else that we can do to help improve our day-to-day lives.
Well, I always start with a morning routine, which is a morning meditation and a morning journaling practice. And then I have some, favorite oracle cards that I pull from. And I just really like to take the time, a few minutes, if that's all I have. I have more time now because my kids are older, up to 20 minutes. And I take that time in the morning, every morning, just to kind of check in, journal what came through in my dreams that night, the night before, what happened the day before, just kind of reflecting and setting myself up for the day rather than just jumping into it and then chaos ensues,
Yeah.
So I really take the time to really focus and get into my body before jumping into the day and just tackling tasks, whatever that is.
And offer a piece of wisdom for moms or anyone really trying to strive to find their strength and voice.
Advice for moms finding their voice. You know, I just sound repetitive because it is really just a check-in and a movement practice.
Yeah.
Anytime you can really get in tune with your body and listen to it, it takes some practice to really just tune in and listen to what your body's telling you. Sometimes it's going to tell you to sit your ass down and not do anything that day
Yeah.
or take more time for reflection. And sometimes it's go time and you have the energy and the will and the strength to do that. And then you just go. It's really about, yeah, really about checking in without sounding too fluffy, checking in with yourself and listening to your body and what it's trying to tell you.
And the best advice you've ever received.
The best is best advice, gosh. The only one that comes to mind right away, because it was advice I didn't take, it's going to sound really simple and silly, but it was about raising my daughters because they're so close in age. And it was just me. One of my friends and previous employers who had a daughter said, you know what? The best thing I can tell you is listen when they come to you with interest in boys or whatever their preference is, don't don't act surprised or don't be alarmed and don't act alarmed. Just go, oh, really? What else do you want to tell me about him? And just kind of listen. And
Yeah.
I took the opposite approach of what? What's his name? Where does he live? What, just kind of being a little too on guard. And so that kind of backfired.
That is some great advice. I like that. I've never really heard that, but it is true. Just kind of like keep your cool.
Yeah, keep your cool and just listen because if not, then they're not going to tell you shit and you just don't want that.
Yeah.
Um, so that was one thing I do remember and it's not, it's not groundbreaking, but it would have been helpful to have followed that piece of advice.
Well, Natalie, thank you so much for coming on this week's episode of Not Your Mama's podcast. All of her links are down below in the show notes. Don't be shy, go say hi, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Thanks for listening.